everybody, and welcome to the 15th episode of Host the Pro, where disruptive influencers talk about e-commerce marketing. Today we have Tamsen Webster with us. Hi, Tamsen.
Hello, Rakefet. How are you?
Amazing. How are you today?
I'm well. The sun is shining in Boston, Massachusetts, where I am, and I'll take it, especially this late in the year.
Yeah, sounds good and great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much.
Tamsen is a message strategist and an idea whisperer. I love this title. And also the author of Find Your Red Thread, right?
Yes, that's it.
Amazing. And today we're going to speak about brand storytelling. And just before diving into all the details, what is brand storytelling actually?
Well, I think there's what it is and what it should be, and they're not always the same thing. So I think what it should be is the brand bringing its own way of seeing the world to life, right? Through its actions, through the content that it produces, through the interactions and various touch points with all of its customers, clients, audiences, all the way through whether that's e-commerce or anything else, but e-commerce, since we're talking about that today. What brand storytelling often is, though, is something a little bit different. And I think a lot of times brand storytelling ends up being just another name for advertising. It's just another name for let's push a message out there that may or may not be accurate to how things actually are or what the experience actually is, but ends up being more aspirational. But I believe that it's possible to have the true, aligned, attuned storytelling be real. And so that's really what I'm all about.
Yeah, so authenticity is like a big part of, telling a story about your brand.
Yeah, and I prefer personally. I mean, authenticity, yes. I think that authenticity means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so for me, the way I look at what I think is most important when it comes to effective brand storytelling, the storytelling that we're really looking to make sure that we're, that we find the right people and the right people find us, right? The people for whom our companies, our products and services are really designed and would serve best, that they're able to find us. And in order to do that, to me, that authenticity really shows up in two ways. One, it's alignment, right? Of everything that you do and say are aligned with each other. And that, again, all of those experiences that somebody has with you through every touch point in that consumer decision journey echo the same kind of outlook. They echo the same kind of values, the same kind of approach. And there's an attunement, a tuning, right? So one is getting everything in line. And second is getting everything tuned so that it's appropriate for the situation. Because that's the thing. Another thing that I see a lot of times is a missed opportunity is that we use exactly the same message everywhere, no matter what the client or the prospect might be, no matter what the channel might be. But and even where different people might be in that decision-making journey. But for us to really connect with a story, it needs to be the right story for the right moment. And that means really tuning that story as it makes sense for the application, for the audience, and for the outcome that we're looking for.
And why is it, specifically important for e-commerce brands to start, working on this brand story to be aligned, to have this comprehensive?
Because in a lot of ways, because it is all in the story. That's almost all you have is the story that you tell and the story that people experience. Because unlike a brick and mortar business or a business where people are kind of going back and forth, and it's just like the difference between meeting somebody in person and meeting them over Zoom. There's a lot of extra information that filters out that you don't get to have. You don't get to see what somebody actually looks like. You don't really get to hear the full resonance of their voice, for instance. And so for e-commerce, when everything has to happen in those touch points, it's critical that that alignment, that attunement is in place. The second thing that I would say, reason why I think it's so important for e-commerce, is that idea of, that aspiration that we have for brand storytelling, right? That the right people will find us and that we will find the right people, means that attunement of the story has to be right, because because everything happens online, everything happens, it's all in response to somebody typing something in, right? Into a search engine or an algorithm serving something up. And that, in order for that to happen, in order for someone to type in something, type in a question they have, a need that they're trying to meet, a problem they're trying to solve, and for your business to come up, that has to be, you have to know that, you have to start the story there, that your language has to be aligned, it has, and it has to be right. And second, we have to make sure that it's as powerful as possible, so that when you do get served back up as a result, someone sees not only something that they want in what you produce, but something they didn't expect, something that makes them go, oh, well, that looks interesting, let me explore.
Do you think that there are brands, and a lot of the e-commerce brands, they start as e-commerce. I mean, I have a store, I have those products. Let me just draw something for my brand and let's go for it.
Yeah.
And is there a stage where you say it might be sustainable until that stage, but from that point on, if you want to keep scaling, you just cannot deal without a story, or is it just
you have a story
fluid?
whether you choose to tell it or not. That's the thing. I mean, I think that's the important thing, is that people's interactions with you are creating, they tell a story. And so you can either leave that to chance, or you can create one that's false, which I don't agree with, or you can take ownership of the story that you have, and determine what it is, how to make it as powerful as possible, and if necessary, where you may need to rewrite a little bit of it in order to better align with what you're looking for. I don't. Someone need to understanding. So let's back up for just a minute, because I have a very specific definition of story, and it isn't just this once upon a time kind of origin story about the brand, nor is it the vision story about where we can take you in the future with our products and whatever, nor is it how can we help you in the moment. To me, a story is deeper than that. That the reason why those once upon a time or sometime in the future or happening right now kind of stories are so powerful is because story is how we make sense of the things around us. It's the explanation that we create in our minds to make something make sense. So when we have a positive interaction, let's say with an online brand, then we start to we create a story in our minds. Like, oh, well, that's a good brand, that they've got good values. Who knows if that's actually true, but we've created that story for ourselves of saying, oh, this is the brand for me because they seem to know exactly what I'm looking for. They've got the right answers. I like how I've interacted with them. And the same thing is true if you don't have a positive experience, right? You come up with a different story about the company, about the e-commerce brand that you're interacting with. So my point is like, that story's happening anyway. So wouldn't it make sense to really understand and supply as strong a story as possible? And to start from the very beginning of even the idea of your company, and making sure that you have not just a strong story to tell, but a strong story to live. Because I think that's what it comes down to. Because you can say your brand is whatever you want it to be, but your brand is actually people's sum total of their experiences with you. And what we don't, I think, spend enough time with is what about our company leads us to behave in certain way that creates those experiences, or to what about our company leads to certain decisions that lead to those experiences. And so that's actually what my work is all about, is kind of the story beneath the brand. It's what's that story that we live, so that the story that we tell is as powerful and as accurate as possible.
So it sounds like the brand story is very much tied to the company culture, to the organization culture, isn't it?
100%, absolutely. And just like a brand, what we say a brand isn't actually the brand. What we say a culture isn't actually the culture. So you're right. In both cases, this comes down to what's happening underneath, which is, why is it that a company does what it does the way that it does it? And that's really what I wrote my book to help companies uncover. And yes, it's through the lens of how you explain it to somebody else and how you create a story that someone will tell themselves about your company. But fundamentally, what that story contains is why you do what you do the way that you do it. Because that's the information that we're searching for when we create the story. The stories are about why someone did something the way that they did it.
Yeah.
And so it's
It's the
about, well,
explanation.
yeah, it's the
Yeah.
explanation. And so by figuring that out for your own company, again, not aspirationally, but what it actually is, allows you to get that alignment and that attunement in place.
Are there any, specific brand stories that inspire you that you can share with us?
Oh my goodness. Geez, there's always so many. I don't know. I mean, I've got my, I'm very brand loyal, probably because I've spent 25 years in brand and message strategy. So I tend, so many of my favorite brands are my favorite brands because I think they've done this so well. And any new brand that I pay attention to usually is doing it, like, gets my attention because again, they're doing it so well. So some of my favorite, one of my favorite clothing brands, and they were very much leaders in direct to consumer e-commerce, was Diane von Furstenberg. So it's a women's clothing brand. And so even their early forays into direct to consumer selling reflected the values of the company in a way that was completely consistent and has been over time. And like that's one of the things that I love about that brand, is that some of it is because it comes straight from the founder. Like Diane von Furstenberg is still alive. She's still very active in the company. I think she very much sets the direction of the company and how they do what they do the way that they do it. What was interesting was that a few years ago, she was trying to step back a little bit, and they brought somebody else in, and it really changed the nature of the brand, and it failed spectacularly.
Wow.
And then so that person went out, and then she came back in, and they were able to go back to kind of the story that was strong, rather than like, here's what we could be. They said, all right, how do we build a story that's built on what's already strong about our company? That, we are for these kinds of women. We create these kinds of clothes. They have these kinds of qualities. And that isn't limiting. It doesn't mean that they're always producing the same thing the same way every year, but it gives them those consistent constraints so that when you've got a very dedicated fan like myself, I have a consistent experience with them over and over again. And that's the kind of, that may not be inspirational brand storytelling, but to me, that's a company living their brand because they have such a deep understanding of, I've said it multiple times now, why they do what they do the way that they do it.
Yeah, and it also builds loyalty eventually. These days,
100%,
e-commerce
yeah.
brands, they're just looking for ways how do I gain those returning customers to my brand? And it's about your story. Give them the same story, give them the same value, the same experience, right?
That's right. Because in order for someone to, so we can pretty much get anybody to do anything once, right? You give them a really good deal, you sell them a product that was like, oh, that's, that looks really good. I see a Facebook ad and that looks great. The decision to keep doing it, and even further, the decision to tell other people about that brand, rests entirely on what their experience is with the brand after you've gotten their attention in the first place. So if I see something that is a cool product, okay, great, I'm gonna try it once. But if it's cheaply made, if it doesn't work, well, I'm not going to go back and buy over and over again. I'm going to keep looking until I find somebody who does what they say they're going to do, that lives up to the promise that they put out there. So I think that that's a really critical aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also spoke about the consistency and alignment. And for me, while you were speaking, I thought about our own, Maple's brand story. And it was kind of evolving as well at the beginning. When I joined Mayple, we just, changed the name, and we were kind of, okay, let's build a story. Let's tell our story. Who are we? And it seems to me like we're always, sharpening and, making it more and more accurate to who we are as we grow as well.
That's important because it's one of the reasons why I love the analogy that I used. So I use this analogy of the red thread to describe this kind of core story, that this operating system that guides why we do what we do the way that we do it. But part of the reason why I like that as a metaphor for this is that it's fluid, and it can be extended, and it can be tied into other things, as opposed to a brand which is fixed by nature. Like its metaphorical origins are something that is seared into something else, and it doesn't allow for adaptation easily over time. It doesn't allow for partnerships and alignment with other organizations or even with other people. And so it was, even from my fairly early days of thinking about brand and brand strategy and what wasn't working, like that was always something that really frustrated me about brand, is that they were fixed. And but we aren't, like, companies aren't, and people aren't. And so, but it comes back to what I was saying with, Daimler Furstenberg and that company. And I see it again in others of my favorite brands. So a lot of my favorite brands tend to be like clothing brands, but that's all right. Like Birkenstocks, love them. So yeah, I don't usually wear my Birkenstocks with my Daimler Furstenbergs, but I love them both.
I can totally relate to that.
So it's like, it might be DVF up top when you can see it and Birkenstocks on the bottom, but that's all right. But what I appreciate that is that those are actually both examples of brands that have been able to evolve with with changing times, that are able to respond to different tastes and needs and ways of buying even. DVF, partly by necessity, has essentially like not available in stores anymore. It's almost exclusively an e-commerce brand now. I mean, the only freestanding store left for them is their flagship store in New York. And so that I think is the power of understanding kind of, again, another way I think of the red thread, as I said, was an operating system. When you understand your operating system, you can understand how you can retool it to achieve a different thing without making it a huge pivot or a shift. You're able to say, well, because we serve these kinds of people and we solve these kinds of problems, and we believe these certain things to be true, and we take these perspectives, and we have this set of experiences or this set of expertise, or these are our approaches that we found to be useful. Those can be mixed and matched in different ways. And that doesn't mean that you're always tied in to doing the same thing the same way every time.
Yeah. What would be the best tip you can give, e-commerce entrepreneurs or marketing leaders when, being in this process of refining and, building their brand story?
So I think the thing to me that's most key is, one, an understanding of a flip of a mindset, and two, a first step they can take to put that mindset into place. So the first flip of the mindset that I think is really important when we're talking about brand storytelling is that you're not telling your story as you would tell it. You need to be thinking about, how do you build your story as your audience, or as your intended audience would tell it. That's really what you need to shape it on. And when you start to put that lens on it, you realize that a lot of times we're trying to do things like put words into our audience's mouth that they would never say, not to other people, not to their friends, right? Like they just wouldn't ever describe your brand that way. Maybe you want them to, but they never would. So just that kind of shift into thinking, all right, what is the story that they will tell? What's the story they're going to tell themselves to themselves about our brand? And what's the story they would tell by themselves to other people? That, I think, is just, even right there, starts to shift the language and the perspective that you bring, because it means that you're not building your case for your brand or for your company. You're building your audience's case. Why? Based on how they currently see the world. Based on what they want, what they believe, how they're looking at the world so far. Why they would create that story, that rationalization, that justification, that explanation to themselves about why they would do something different than they're doing right now. And we all know by instinct that it's not features and benefits that sell it. And yet we haven't really ever, I don't think we've really come up with an effective description or explanation for why features and benefits aren't enough. But to me, the features and benefits are the result, right? They're the result of taking this particular approach. But where we don't spend enough time in our brand storytelling is, what's the cause of that approach? Why did we make the decision to do it this way? Why did we make the decision to produce this product this way, or to offer this service this way? Because yes, it's to produce those results, but why that way, right? And what's so simultaneously infuriating and powerful about that is, that's where the differentiation lies, is in why you chose that approach. Again, it's not because, of course, you wanted those benefits, but so did everybody else. But the reason why your company chose that is really important. So that's super key, is this flip of, build their case for you, build their story that they would tell, not yours. And the really tactical place to start for that, I found, is, one of the places, just a very simple way to get started is to say, what is a question that they are actually asking right now, whether it's of Google or of searching, like, what are they looking for right now that your product or service is a solution for? Not what you wish they were looking for, or not what you know that they really deep down are looking for. I mean, what is the thing that they're putting in the search engine? And maybe they're not linking it to your product right now, but that's your job, is to link from, all right, they're asking this question right now. But if they understood our approach, not our product, but our approach, then they might now, okay, if they can agree with the approach, well, they're going to be much more likely to agree with the product.
Yeah, it's amazing that throughout my interviews on Elster Pro, a lot of the times it really comes down to actually talking with your customers, right? Hearing their words, hearing their thoughts, understanding their actual personal journey while, before reaching into your website and, doing the thing there.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're lucky that we have very technical ways to do that, but there's still very simple ways to get those questions. Like, just, I was talking to somebody else the other day about this. I mean, even just talk to people about, like, who aren't your clients sometimes, like, who are current. I mean, the important thing, actually, in a weird way, is not to talk to your current clients, because your current clients have already convinced themselves of your approach, and therefore are already convinced, like you are, that your products and your services are right. So they're going to make the same mistake that you are, right, when they're talking to somebody else, because they're going to talk about the features and benefits and all of that, more than they're going to talk about what they were looking for at the beginning, and why your approach was different, why that made sense with them, and so why they decided that your product or service was the right one. So by talking to people who aren't your clients yet and talking about them, just say, let's say you do something about, for employee engagement, let's say, like, that's what your, offer is all about, what your services are all about. Or even, let's say, no, let's do something that's a little bit more directly, kind of something that's only negotiated online. Let's say it's a software as a service, and it's something like a time tracking software, right? They aren't, and let's say you've come up with an amazing approach to time tracking software that you've called, trackification. Okay. The tendency is to say, all right, we're going to put all our brand advertising and our messaging around this idea of trackification. But nobody's talking about it that way. Like, nobody's talking about it that way right now. They're saying, how can I get better reports for my employees? How can we make it more efficient to charge for billable hours? How can I know that that my employees are getting a good balance between, directed productive work and free space creative time as well? Like, they're asking those kinds of questions. They're not asking about trackification yet. So that's why I was saying, like, but you can find out that answer by just saying, like, just talking to someone, saying, what are your biggest frustrations when it comes to, tracking or recording time? Oh, okay. And you're like, okay, well, we solve that. And again, don't jump right in, just say, but listen to how they say it. Listen to what their biggest questions are. Listen for the, why can't we, what if we, how can I, those are the kinds of questions that you're looking for. And you could talk to people, you can go to answerthepublic.com, you can do your own research. And for this is where quantitative research is much more useful than qualitative, because quantitative is going to be the one that gets you those themes and those other concepts, and you can draw them out. but there's such a rich opportunity for us to understand how our prospective clients are talking about these things right now, that can be really powerful. Just a quick example. I remember I saw a Facebook post for, I think it was for, at the point, still in Kickstarter, and I forget the name of the company. But it's, what it is the product is a personal thermostat. That's how they sell it. But I remember the Facebook ad was served up with like, "Are you cold all the time?" And like, no matter the temperature. And I was like, yes, I am. And then they would follow up with like, well, what if you could be, comfortable no matter where you are? And I'm like, that sounds awesome. But I'm not looking for a personal thermostat. I'm looking to not feel cold all the time. And so that, what I like about that company is like, no, I don't remember what their company name is, but what I remember was that their answer to my question of how can I be not cold all the time is a personal thermostat. And that was something I understood intuitively enough to get it, that if I Google personal thermostat, we'll figure out what that company was, no problem.
Sure.
And to me, like, that's the powerful, like, that's just kind of, we're talking about initial engagement with e-commerce. Like that's what's powerful. Help people. Because if we're thinking about e-commerce, and particularly we're talking about brand storytelling, in terms of, it's not so much selling to people, it's back to what we were saying in the beginning, Rakefet. It's that we are trying to make sure that the people for whom our service, our product or service is right, we're making it easier to find us. And so by anchoring it in a question that somebody has, and then providing an unexpected, differentiated answer to that doesn't rely on, crazy made up words, trackification, right? Then we're much more likely to get someone to go, oh, that's interesting. Click through. I want to learn more.
Or go and Google it afterwards.
Or go and Google it afterwards. Exactly. Because I don't remember what it was, but I'm like, it really sounded interesting. And I said, what? Yeah, I just think we forget as marketers, as sellers, as e-commerce folks, that we kind of have to remember to put our human hats back on every now and then. I mean, we're so busy running our businesses. We're so busy trying to figure out how we're going to sell, how we're going to keep the bills paid, how we're going to find new customers, that we forget that we're human, which means that in a lot of ways, we are our own best focus group. And what I mean by that is, if you put your human hat back on, you can think to yourself, well, if I didn't know that this product existed, and if I didn't already believe that it were right, would this message work for me? Right? Or would I want this to be the interaction that I'm having? Because I think what happens a lot of times is that we do get so pressured for good reasons. We're trying, again, these are small businesses. We're trying to keep them afloat. We're trying to get those cut. All of that, that we do to other people what we would never tolerate being done to us. We send out messages that would never work for us. I spent 3+ years working at an advertising agency. And so I'm particularly sensitive to ads, some of which are, beautiful and, evocative, and don't tell you a darn thing about what problem they solve or what it is. And I get frustrated for that, because I was like, some company paid a lot of money for that ad, and it's pretty, but the thing is, it's hopeful in a way that is magical thinking, that someone's going to look at that mysterious ad, or banner ad or whatever, and go, I wonder what that is. Let me know. Yeah. If it's not clear that it answers a question that I have right now, people are not, there's too much information coming at them. They're not going to click through. So
the clarity beats every creative work, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I like to say that, clarity beats cleverness every time. Every time. Just never sacrifice clarity for cleverness, because in a lot of cases, you've got these precious resources. Make sure you're spending them in such a way that maximizes their potential return for you, which means start your message where it's already relevant to people. And that's why I say that the first step that people can take when they're really trying to think about this different approach, this more kind of rooted approach to brand storytelling, is start with a question that people are asking. Like I said, because if they don't have an answer to it right now, it's immediately relevant, and they are going to be naturally curious because they're like, oh, does this person have the answer? Are you cold all the time? Yes, I am. Do you have a new answer? Ooh, that looks interesting. That looks like an easy thing. It ended up being, it didn't meet out for me on the amount that I was willing to pay to not be cold all the time. But at least that piece of it was successful, right? And that's, I think, where it's so important to root again back into what people are thinking about, how they're talking about it right now. And
I have a
understand
question.
sometimes that it's a longer process than we want it to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So how is the book going?
Book is going great. It's funny. It is it seems to be going really well. That's a hard question to answer when you have an online only book. So my book is not, you can get it in stores, but if a bookstore has it, it's because they've ordered it. So I have to take other signs of how well it's doing, but so far so good. Yeah, it's I keep getting my royalty check, so that's a good sign.
It's a good sign.
I've been able to sell rights to it in Japan, Korea, and India, and the audiobook rights. So again, a good sign. And most importantly to me, people are saying that it really is transforming the way that they think about this work, which I'm super excited about.
Sounds super interesting, and that's probably the next thing I'll do is is read your book after this interview for sure. Tamsen, thank you so much for this interview. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
So much value and inspiration. So thanks.
My pleasure. Well, thank you so much, Rakefet. It was great to see you. Thanks for listening to me chatter on and for asking such great questions.
Great, and until next time.
All right, take care. Bye.
תודה רבה. ביי.